I woke up that morning to find a certified letter taped to my front door like some kind of legal warrant. And when I opened it, the words "cease and desist" were printed in bold letters that practically screamed at me from the page. My name is Jake Ferguson, and I had been running a small snow machine rental business out of my home in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, for the past 3 winters. Nothing fancy, just a side hustle that helped pay the mortgage and brought joy to kids in the neighborhood during the snowy months. I had 8 snowmobiles that I kept in pristine condition in my oversized garage, and I would rent them out on weekends to families who wanted to explore the trails around our community without dropping thousands of dollars on their own machines. The letter was from Patricia Hendricks, president of the Copper Ridge Homeowners Association, and it informed me that my commercial enterprise was in direct violation of the HOA covenants. I read through the document 3 times, my coffee getting cold on the kitchen counter as I tried to wrap my head around the absurdity of it all. According to Patricia, multiple residents had complained about the excessive traffic and noise pollution my rental business was creating. The letter demanded I cease all operations immediately or face daily fines of $500. I grabbed my phone and called my buddy Marcus, who had been renting machines from me for his twin boys every other weekend. "Did you complain about my rental business?" I asked as soon as he picked up. "What? No, man, why would I?" Marcus sounded genuinely confused. "The boys love those snowmobiles. We were actually planning to rent them again this Saturday." After hanging up with Marcus, I made 5 more calls to regular customers. None of them had filed complaints. That was when I realized what this was really about. Patricia Hendricks had moved into the neighborhood 6 months ago, and from day one, she had made it her personal mission to control every aspect of life in Copper Ridge. She had already forced the Johnsons to repaint their house because the shade of beige was not on the approved color list. She had fined the Williamses $2,000 for planting rose bushes that exceeded the maximum allowed height, and now she was coming after me. I decided to attend the next HOA meeting, which was scheduled for Thursday evening at the community center. I spent the next 2 days preparing my case, printing out copies of the original HOA covenants from when I purchased my home 7 years ago. Nowhere in those documents was there any prohibition against home-based businesses. I also gathered testimonials from neighbors who supported my rental operation. Thursday arrived with fresh snowfall, the kind that made the whole neighborhood look like a Christmas card. I drove to the community center, my folder of documents on the passenger seat. The parking lot was surprisingly full, which either meant a lot of people cared about HOA business or Patricia had rallied her supporters. Inside, about 30 residents sat in folding chairs facing a long table where Patricia held court alongside 4 other board members. Patricia was exactly what you would expect. Mid-40s, perfectly styled blonde hair that probably cost more than my monthly utilities, and an expression that suggested she smelled something unpleasant at all times. "Jake Ferguson," she said as I walked in, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "How wonderful of you to join us. I assume you received our letter." "I did," I replied, taking a seat in the front row. "And I have some concerns about it." Patricia exchanged glances with the other board members. "Your concerns will have to wait. We have other business to address first." For the next 45 minutes, I sat through discussions about snow removal schedules, holiday decoration guidelines, and a heated debate about whether basketball hoops should be allowed in driveways. Finally, Patricia cleared her throat and pulled out a familiar-looking document. "Now, regarding the matter of Jake Ferguson's illegal commercial operation," she began. "It is not illegal," I interrupted, standing up. I have all the proper business licenses from the county, and there is nothing in our original HOA covenants that prohibits home-based businesses. Patricia's smile tightened. The covenants were amended 2 months ago at a special board meeting. All commercial enterprises are now banned. I never received notice of any amendment, I said, looking around the room. Several other homeowners shook their heads, indicating they had not been notified either. Notice was posted on the community website, Patricia replied smoothly. The website that nobody uses because you only created it a month ago. This came from Tom Bradley, a retired teacher who lived 3 houses down from me. That seems like convenient timing, Patricia. Patricia's face flushed. The amendment was legally enacted. Mr. Ferguson needs to cease his operations or he will face fines. I opened my folder and pulled out my documents. I spoke with a real estate attorney yesterday. Amendments to HOA covenants require a vote of all homeowners, not just the board. You did not have the authority to make this change. The room erupted in murmurs. Patricia banged her gavel, a ridiculous wooden thing that looked like she had ordered it from some HOA president fantasy catalog. This meeting is not a courtroom, Mr. Ferguson. The board has made its decision. Then the board has overstepped its authority, I replied calmly. And I will continue operating my business. Patricia stood up, her hands pressed flat against the table. Then you will be fined $500 per day, starting tomorrow, and if you do not pay, we will place a lien on your property. I knew arguing further was pointless. Patricia had clearly made up her mind, and the other board members seemed too intimidated to challenge her. I walked out of that meeting angry but not defeated. I had dealt with difficult people before, and I was not about to let some power-hungry HOA president destroy a business I had built from scratch. The next morning, I woke up to another letter, this one informing me that the daily fines had officially started. I called my attorney, a sharp woman named Rebecca Chen who specialized in property law. After explaining the situation, she gave me her assessment. You are right that they needed a full homeowner vote to amend the covenants, Rebecca said. But fighting this through the courts will take months, maybe over a year. Legal fees could run you $30,000 or more. Even if you win, the HOA might appeal. So what do you suggest? I asked. You could try to organize a recall of the board, but that also requires getting enough homeowners to care. Or you could comply with their demands and find another location for your business. Neither option appealed to me. Moving my operation would be expensive and complicated, requiring commercial property rental and different insurance. And while I knew many neighbors disagreed with Patricia, getting people to actively oppose her was another matter. She had a way of making everyone afraid of becoming her next target. That afternoon, I was in my garage doing maintenance on one of the snowmobiles when I heard a small voice behind me. Mr. Ferguson. I turned to see Emma Rodriguez, an 8-year-old from down the street, standing in my driveway with her younger brother Tyler. Hey, Emma. Hey, Tyler. What brings you two by? My mom said you are not allowed to rent snowmobiles anymore, Emma said, her eyes wide with disappointment. Is that true? I wiped my hands on a rag and walked over to them. Well, the HOA says I cannot run it as a business anymore. But why? Tyler asked. He was 6 and had ridden with his dad just last weekend. You did not do anything wrong. Some people just like making rules, I said, ruffling his hair. Emma looked at the snowmobiles visible through the open garage door. We were saving up to rent them for our dad's birthday next month. We wanted to surprise him. Looking at their disappointed faces, something clicked in my head. Patricia had banned my rental business. She had been very specific about that in her letter and during the meeting, but she had never said anything about me loaning my snowmobiles. If I was not charging money, it was not a commercial operation. It was just a neighbor helping other neighbors. Tell you what, I said, kneeling down to their level. Who says anything about renting? What if I just loaned them to people, for free? Emma's face lit up. Really? You would do that? Sure. The HOA banned my business, but they cannot stop me from being generous with my own property. The kids ran home to tell their parents, and I went inside to start planning. If Patricia wanted to play games, I could play too. By that evening, I had drafted a simple equipment loan agreement. It stated that I was loaning my snowmobiles at no charge, that borrowers were responsible for fuel and minor maintenance during use, and that they assumed all liability. I sent a mass email to my entire customer list explaining the new arrangement. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My inbox flooded with replies from families thanking me and asking to reserve time slots. Several people offered to help maintain the machines or donate fuel money, which I politely declined. This had to be completely free, or Patricia would find a way to twist it into a commercial operation. That Saturday, I loaned out all 8 snowmobiles to different families. The Rodriguez family took 2 for their boys. Marcus borrowed 2 for his twins. A single mom named Jennifer took 1 for her teenage daughter. It felt good, maybe even better than when I was charging for rentals, because I knew I was doing something genuinely helpful for the community while simultaneously giving Patricia a headache. Sunday afternoon, I was restocking my garage refrigerator with cold drinks for borrowers when my doorbell rang. I already knew who it was before I opened the door. Patricia Hendricks stood on my porch in designer athleisure, where that probably cost more than one of my snowmobiles. Behind her was Grace Mitchell, the HOA vice president and Patricia's closest ally. Grace was quieter than Patricia, but equally committed to enforcing every possible rule. "Jake," Patricia said, not bothering with pleasantries. "I am aware of your little scheme." "Scheme?" I asked innocently. "I am just loaning some equipment to friends and neighbors." "You are circumventing the HOA's legitimate authority," Patricia snapped. "This is still a commercial operation, just disguised. No money is changing hands," I pointed out. "I am not charging fees, accepting donations, or making any profit. I am simply allowing people to borrow my personal property. There is no law or covenant against that." Grace spoke up, her voice thin and reedy. "You are creating the same traffic and noise issues that the original complaints were about." "What complaints?" I asked directly. "I contacted every one of my regular customers and none of them filed complaints. So who exactly is complaining?" Patricia's jaw tightened. "That information is confidential. In other words, the complaints do not exist," I said. "You just decided you did not like what I was doing and invented a reason to stop it." "Watch your tone," Patricia warned. "The board has broad authority to maintain community standards." "The board has the authority granted by the covenants, which you violated by creating amendments without a proper vote," I countered. "I have done my homework, Patricia. I know exactly what you can and cannot do." Patricia took a step closer, and I could see the anger in her eyes. "You are making an enemy of the wrong person, Jake. I can make your life very difficult." "Is that a threat?" I asked calmly. "It is a promise," Patricia replied. "If you continue this, you will regret it." She turned and walked back to her silver Mercedes, Grace scurrying behind her. I watched them drive away, my stomach tight with tension. I had dealt with difficult clients and competitors in business before, but something about Patricia's intensity unsettled me. She did not just want to win. She wanted to dominate. Over the next 2 weeks, the free loan program exploded in popularity. Word spread beyond my original customer base. Parents I had never met were emailing me, asking if they could borrow machines for their kids. I created a shared calendar online where people could sign up for available time slots. Every weekend was completely booked, and even some weekday afternoons were filling up. The neighborhood kids were having the time of their lives. I would see them zipping down the trails behind our community, their laughter echoing through the pine trees. Parents thanked me constantly, saying how much money I was saving them and how happy their children were. It felt like I was building something real, a genuine community spirit that had nothing to do with property values or covenant compliance. Patricia, predictably, was not pleased. She began showing up randomly when people were picking up or dropping off snowmobiles, taking photos and videos with her phone. She measured the time various vehicles spent parked in front of my house. She walked the property line with a tape measure, checking whether any of my equipment was stored too close to the boundary. Then the citations started arriving. First, I got a notice that my grass was 1 inch taller than the maximum allowed height, resulting in a $100 fine. Never mind that it was winter, and barely any grass was visible through the snow. Then, I received a citation because my garage door had been left open for more than the permitted 2 consecutive hours, another $100. Each infraction was petty and ridiculous, but they were all technically violations according to the Byzantine list of rules Patricia had been systematically adding. I paid the fines without complaint, not wanting to give Patricia any excuse to escalate. But I also started documenting everything. I took photos of my property showing that many neighbors had identical or worse violations that were going unaddressed. I saved every email and letter from the HOA. I recorded the dates and times of Patricia's visits to my property. If this was going to turn into a legal battle, I wanted to be prepared. 3 weeks into the free loan program, things took a darker turn. I was at work, managing the small sporting goods store I owned downtown when Marcus called me, his voice tight with anger. "Jake, someone slashed the tires on 2 of your snowmobiles." I felt my stomach drop. "What? When?" "I do not know. I came to pick up the machines like we scheduled, and they are sitting in your driveway with flat tires. All 4 tires on each machine just slashed clean through." I told my assistant manager to cover the store and drove home immediately. Marcus was right. 2 of my best snowmobiles sat in the driveway, their tires cut so thoroughly they were beyond repair. The damage had to be deliberate. This was not some accident or random act. I called the police and filed a report. The responding officer, a veteran cop named Sergeant Davis, examined the damage and took photos. "Any idea who might have done this?" he asked. "I have a suspicion," I said carefully, "but I do not have proof." I explained the situation with the HOA, and Sergeant Davis nodded knowingly. HOA disputes can get ugly, but unless you have evidence linking someone specific to the vandalism, there is not much we can do. No cameras. I have been meaning to install some, I admitted. Just had not gotten around to it. After Sergeant Davis left, I immediately ordered a comprehensive security camera system online, paying extra for next-day delivery. But the damage was done. Replacing those tires would cost me over $800, and I would have to take 2 machines out of rotation until the repairs were complete. That evening, I received an email from Patricia with the subject line, "Vandalism Concerns." In it, she expressed deep concern about the vandalism incident and suggested that my high-traffic operation might be attracting criminal elements to the neighborhood. She recommended I cease loaning the snowmobiles for the safety of the community. The audacity was breathtaking. I did not respond to her email, knowing anything I said in anger would only make things worse. Instead, I focused on getting the cameras installed and the snowmobiles repaired. The cameras arrived the next day, and I spent 6 hours mounting them around my property. I positioned them to cover my driveway, garage, and the street in front of my house. If someone tried to vandalize my equipment again, I would have them on video. Meanwhile, the free loan program continued. I explained to borrowers what had happened, and many of them expressed outrage on my behalf. Several offered to help pay for the repairs, but I declined. This situation was not their fault, and I did not want to drag them into my conflict with Patricia. 2 days after installing the cameras, they proved their worth. I was reviewing footage from the previous night when I caught something interesting. At 11:30 p.m., Patricia's Mercedes drove slowly past my house. The car stopped directly in front of my driveway for nearly 3 minutes while Patricia sat in the driver's seat, clearly looking at my property. Then she drove on. She came back the next night at a similar time and the night after that. She was not doing anything illegal, technically. The street was public, but the pattern of surveillance was unsettling and helped establish her obsessive interest in my activities. A week later, my cameras caught something more significant. At 2 in the morning, a figure dressed in dark clothing approached my driveway. The person looked around nervously before approaching one of the snowmobiles I had left outside after a late return. The figure bent down near the machine's fuel tank, and I watched as they did something I could not quite make out. I called the police immediately and sent them the footage. Sergeant Davis came by the next morning to review it. "That is definitely suspicious activity," he agreed. "Though the quality makes it hard to identify the person. Can you tell what they were doing?" I went out to examine the snowmobile. After some inspection, I found sand had been poured into the fuel tank. If I had not discovered it, the engine would have been destroyed the next time someone tried to use it. I showed this to Sergeant Davis. "This is malicious destruction of property," he said gravely. "I will file an additional report and increase patrols in your area." "But Jake, you need to be careful. Someone clearly wants you to stop what you are doing, and they are willing to break the law to make that happen." After the sergeant left, I flushed the fuel system and cleaned the tank. Another few hours of work that accomplished nothing except cost me time and money. But I refused to be intimidated. I had every right to loan my property to whoever I wanted, and I was not going to let Patricia or her associates bully me into stopping. The following Saturday was the Rodriguez family's turn to borrow machines again, and I made sure everything was in perfect working order. Emma and Tyler arrived with their parents around 9 a.m., the kids practically vibrating with excitement. "Are you sure about this?" Maria Rodriguez asked me quietly while her husband helped the kids with helmets. "We heard about the vandalism. We do not want to cause you more trouble." "It is not trouble from you," I assured her. "And I am not going to let one bitter person ruin something good for everyone else." The Rodriguez family took off on the trails, and I settled in to handle the steady stream of other borrowers throughout the day. Around noon, a young couple I did not recognize pulled up in a newer pickup truck. "Hi, are you Jake Ferguson?" the man asked. "I am David Palmer, and this is my wife Lindsay. We just moved to Copper Ridge last month." "Nice to meet you," I said, shaking their hands. "Are you here to pick up a machine? I do not see your name on the calendar." Lindsay glanced at her husband nervously. "Actually, we wanted to warn you about something. Patricia Hendricks came to our house yesterday. She is going door to door trying to get people to sign a petition demanding you stop loaning the snowmobiles." "Did you sign it?" I asked. "Absolutely not," David replied firmly. "We have a 6-year-old son, and we were planning to borrow one of your machines next weekend for his birthday." Patricia was very pushy about it, though. She made it sound like you were running some dangerous illegal operation. "I appreciate you letting me know," I said. And your son's birthday reservation is still good. After the Palmers left, I felt a familiar anger building. Patricia was not just targeting me anymore. She was actively trying to turn the neighborhood against me. I needed to respond, but I had to be smart about it. That evening, I composed a detailed email to every homeowner in Copper Ridge, using the community contact list that was supposed to be for emergencies, but that everyone used for general announcements. In the email, I explained the entire situation from the beginning. The original HOA letter, the improperly enacted covenant amendments, Patricia's harassment, the vandalism, and now her petition campaign. I kept the tone factual and calm, including links to the relevant sections of our original covenants and the Colorado laws governing HOA procedures. I am not asking anyone to take my side, I wrote in conclusion. I am just asking that you have all the facts before making a decision. The snowmobiles will continue to be available for free loan to any family who wants them, and I will continue to handle this situation through proper legal channels. I hit send and waited. Within an hour, my phone started ringing. The first call was from Tom Bradley, the retired teacher. "Jake, I had no idea it had gotten this bad," Tom said. "Patricia told me you were just being difficult about some minor violations. She did not mention anything about vandalism or improper amendments." "She is very good at controlling the narrative," I replied. "Well, some of us are getting pretty tired of her act," Tom said. "I am going to start making some calls. I think it is time we looked into that board recall you mentioned." Over the next few days, I received dozens of supportive calls and emails. Many people shared their own stories of Patricia's bullying and overreach. The Johnsons talked about having to repaint their entire house at enormous expense. The Williamses described being fined for flower boxes that were allegedly too colorful. A single father named Chris Martinez revealed he had been cited for having his work truck parked in his own driveway because Patricia claimed commercial vehicles were prohibited, even though the actual covenant only restricted vehicles over a certain weight class. A movement started building. Tom Bradley organized a petition to recall the entire HOA board and hold new elections. Within a week, he had gathered signatures from over 60% of the homeowners, well above the threshold needed to trigger a recall vote under Colorado law. Patricia responded by calling an emergency HOA meeting, claiming that I had violated privacy rules by sending my mass email. When I showed up to that meeting, the community center was packed with easily 70 residents, the most I had ever seen at an HOA meeting. "This meeting is called to address Jake Ferguson's inappropriate use of community contact information," Patricia announced, her voice sharp. Tom Bradley stood up immediately. "Actually, Patricia, this meeting is going to address your inappropriate conduct as board president. We have more than enough signatures to trigger a recall election, and I am formally submitting this petition tonight." He walked to the front table and placed a thick stack of papers in front of Patricia. Her face went pale as she flipped through the pages, seeing name after name of homeowners demanding her removal. "This is ridiculous," Patricia sputtered. "You people do not understand what I have done for this community. Property values have increased since I took over. Standards have improved." "You have bullied and harassed your neighbors," Maria Rodriguez called out from the audience. "You have invented problems where none existed, and you have spent HOA funds on personal vendettas instead of actual community improvements." Grace Mitchell, the vice president, raised her hand timidly. "Patricia, maybe we should consider stepping down voluntarily. This has all gotten out of hand." Patricia spun on her. "You are supposed to support me." "I did support you," Grace said quietly, but I did not sign up to harass people or look the other way while someone commits vandalism. The room went silent. Everyone stared at Grace, who looked like she immediately regretted speaking. "What do you mean, look the other way?" Sergeant Davis asked. I had not noticed him standing in the back of the room, but now he walked forward. "Do you have information about the vandalism at Mr. Ferguson's property?" Grace's hands were shaking. "I do not know anything for certain." "But you suspect something," the sergeant pressed. Patricia stood up abruptly. "This meeting is over. Everyone needs to leave." "Sit down, miss." "Hendricks," Sergeant Davis said firmly. "Miss Mitchell, if you have information about a crime, you have an obligation to share it." Grace looked at Patricia, then at the sergeant, then down at her hands. "Patricia's nephew Brandon has been staying with her for the past month. I saw him driving Patricia's car late at night several times, and I heard her on the phone with him talking about Jake's snowmobiles, something about teaching him a lesson." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Patricia's face went from pale to bright red. "You have no right to share my private family business. If your nephew vandalized my property under your direction, that is not family business," I said, standing up. "That is conspiracy to commit a crime." Sergeant Davis held up a hand for quiet. "Miss Mitchell, I will need you to come to the station and give a formal statement. Miss Hendricks, I strongly suggest you contact a lawyer." Patricia grabbed her purse and stormed toward the exit, but the sergeant blocked her path. "Where is your nephew now?" "I have no idea," Patricia snapped. "And I am not saying anything else without my attorney." Over the next week, the situation unfolded rapidly. Grace Mitchell gave a detailed statement to the police, describing how she had overheard Patricia instructing her nephew Brandon to scare me into stopping the snowmobile loans. Brandon Hendricks, it turned out, was a 24-year-old with a history of petty crimes who had been living with Patricia after losing his apartment. The police obtained a warrant to search Patricia's home and found several pieces of evidence: tire-slashing tools in Brandon's room, sand that matched what had been poured in my fuel tank, and text messages between Patricia and Brandon discussing my activities. Brandon was arrested and charged with criminal mischief and vandalism. Patricia was charged with conspiracy to commit criminal mischief. The HOA recall election proceeded on schedule. Patricia and the 3 board members who had consistently supported her were all voted out. Tom Bradley was elected as the new president, with Maria Rodriguez as vice president and Chris Martinez as treasurer. One of their first acts was to void all of Patricia's improperly enacted covenant amendments and refund the bogus fines she had levied against various homeowners. As for me, I faced a decision about the snowmobile situation. With the covenant restrictions lifted, I was legally free to resume my rental business. But something had changed during those weeks of running the free loan program. I had seen how much joy it brought to families who might not otherwise be able to afford winter recreation. I had watched kids' faces light up when they realized they could borrow a snowmobile without their parents having to worry about the cost. I called a meeting with Tom and the new board. "I want to keep doing the free loans," I told them. "Maybe even expand it, but I need the HOA's official support." "What did you have in mind?" Tom asked. "What if we made it a community program? The HOA could help maintain a schedule, maybe create an official sign-up system. We could establish clear rules about usage and safety. And if anyone else in the neighborhood has equipment they want to contribute, we could expand beyond just my snowmobiles." The board loved the idea. Within 2 weeks, we had launched the Copper Ridge Community Equipment Share Program. 3 other homeowners contributed their snowmobiles to the pool, and someone donated a pair of kayaks for summer use. We created a simple website where residents could reserve equipment, and the HOA agreed to cover insurance and basic maintenance costs. The program became so popular that local media caught wind of it. A reporter from the Steamboat Pilot newspaper came out to interview me and some of the families using the program. The article, titled HOA Dispute Sparks Community Sharing Movement, ran on the front page of the local section. That publicity led to something I never expected. I got a call from a woman named Susan Wright who worked for a community development nonprofit based in Denver. "I read about your equipment share program," she said. "We have been looking for pilot projects to promote community resource sharing as an alternative to consumer debt. Would you be interested in consulting with other neighborhoods in Colorado who want to set up similar programs?" Within 3 months, I had helped 4 other HOAs in Colorado establish their own equipment sharing programs. The consulting work paid well, better than the rental business had, and it was more fulfilling because I was helping entire communities rather than just individual customers. Brandon Hendricks eventually pleaded guilty to vandalism charges and was sentenced to 6 months in county jail, plus restitution to cover my repair costs and security camera installation. Patricia Hendricks fought her conspiracy charges, but was eventually convicted by a jury. She received a sentence of supervised probation and community service, along with a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board in Colorado. The real victory, though, was not Patricia's downfall. It was what happened in Copper Ridge after she left. The new HOA board focused on actual community improvement rather than petty rule enforcement. They organized neighborhood events, improved common areas, and worked to make sure everyone felt welcome rather than constantly policed. One Saturday afternoon in late March, I was in my garage preparing snowmobiles for what would probably be one of the last weekends of the season. The snow was starting to melt, and spring was creeping into the mountains. Emma and Tyler Rodriguez rode up on their bicycles, their dad following behind. "Mr. Ferguson," Emma called out, "we brought you something." She handed me a handmade card that both kids had signed. Inside, they had written "Thank you for being the best neighbor ever" in crayon, with drawings of snowmobiles and smiling stick figures. "We wanted you to know how much fun we have had this winter," Carlos Rodriguez said, shaking my hand. "You turned what could have been a really negative situation into something that brought everyone together." "I just did what made sense," I replied, feeling slightly embarrassed by the attention. "No, you did more than that," Carlos insisted. "You could have gotten angry or given up or fought Patricia in a way that made everything worse. Instead, you found a creative solution that helped everyone. That takes character." After they left, I sat in my garage looking at that crayon card, and I thought about how the whole situation had unfolded. Patricia had tried to shut down my business out of spite and a need for control. She had harassed me, vandalized my property, and done everything she could to make my life miserable. And in response, I had accidentally created something better than what I started with. The rental business had been about making money. The equipment share program was about building community. One was transactional, the other was transformational. Patricia's attack had forced me to find a different path, and that path had led somewhere I never would have discovered on my own. Summer came, and the snowmobiles went into storage while the kayaks and other seasonal equipment became available. I added paddle boards to the program after finding a good deal on a batch of used ones. Tom Bradley contributed a camping gear collection his kids had outgrown. The program kept growing, kept evolving, kept bringing people together. In August, I ran into Grace Mitchell at the grocery store. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by everything that had happened. When she saw me, she looked like she wanted to disappear into the produce section. "Grace," I said, stopping my cart near hers. "How are you doing?" "I am okay," she said quietly. I am actually moving next month. I cannot really stay here after everything. I am sorry it turned out this way, I said, and I meant it. Grace had been weak and too willing to go along with Patricia's schemes, but she had ultimately done the right thing by speaking up. I should have stopped her earlier, Grace said, her eyes watering. I knew what she was doing was wrong, but I was afraid of her. That sounds stupid, being afraid of an HOA president, but she had this way of making you feel like she could ruin your life if you crossed her. She tried to ruin mine, I acknowledged, but it did not work out the way she planned. Grace managed a weak smile. The equipment program is really wonderful. My grandkids used those kayaks last month when they visited. They had the best time. I am glad, I said. And Grace, wherever you move next, I hope you find good neighbors. She nodded, wiping her eyes, and we parted ways. I genuinely hoped she would find a fresh start somewhere else, a place where she could be part of a community without the toxic influence of someone like Patricia. By the following winter, the Copper Ridge Community Equipment Share Program had become a model for other neighborhoods throughout Colorado. I did consulting work with HOAs in Boulder, Vail, and even some suburbs of Denver. The nonprofit Susan worked for secured grant funding to help offset equipment costs for communities that wanted to start their own programs, but lacked the initial resources. I kept my full-time sporting goods store, but the consulting became a significant side venture. More importantly, it connected me with dozens of communities working to build stronger neighborhood relationships. I met innovative people, saw creative solutions to common problems, and felt like I was part of something meaningful. One evening in December, almost exactly 2 years after receiving Patricia's original cease and desist letter, I sat in my living room reviewing the calendar for the equipment share program. Every weekend through February was completely booked for snowmobiles. We had a waiting list. The program had served over 300 families in 2 years, saving them a collective estimated $80,000 in rental fees while bringing the community together in measurable ways. My phone rang. It was Tom Bradley. "Jake, I am putting together the HOA newsletter and wanted to include a piece about the equipment program. Can you send me some statistics?" "Sure thing," I said, pulling up the spreadsheet where I tracked usage. We have had 1,247 individual equipment loans in the past year, covering snowmobiles, kayaks, paddle boards, camping gear, and bikes. 0 accidents, 0 liability claims, and overwhelmingly positive feedback. "That is incredible," Tom said. "You know, when this all started with Patricia, I worried it was going to tear the neighborhood apart. Instead, we are closer than ever. Property values are actually up since we got rid of her reign of terror and started focusing on community building." After hanging up, I walked out to my garage and looked at the neat rows of equipment, all maintained and ready for use. This had started as a business to make extra money. It had transformed into something that enriched lives, including my own. Patricia Hendricks had tried to take something away from me, and in fighting back, I had discovered something more valuable than profit. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I opened the door to find a couple in their 30s with a young boy, maybe 7 years old, standing between them. "Are you Jake Ferguson?" the woman asked. "I am Linda Chen, and this is my husband Robert. We just moved to Copper Ridge last week." "Welcome to the neighborhood," I said, shaking their hands. "Our son Danny has been talking nonstop about the snowmobiles since he saw some kids riding them yesterday," Robert said. "We wanted to introduce ourselves and maybe get on the calendar." "Of course," I said, kneeling down to Danny's level. "Have you ever ridden a snowmobile before?" Danny shook his head, but his eyes were bright with excitement. "I really want to try." "Well, you are in luck," I told him. How about next Saturday morning? I will be here to show you everything about riding safely, and your parents can ride along with you. After the Chen family left, scheduled for their first snowmobile experience, I stood in my doorway and looked out at the neighborhood. Lights glowed in windows up and down the street. Smoke rose from chimneys. Somewhere nearby, I could hear kids playing in the snow, their voices carrying through the crisp winter air. This was community. Not perfectly maintained lawns and matching house colors and rigid enforcement of arbitrary rules. Community was neighbors helping neighbors, people coming together around shared experiences, kindness multiplying outward in ripples that touched far more lives than you might expect. Patricia Hendricks had wanted control. She had wanted power over others, the authority to dictate how people lived in their own homes. And maybe she had convinced herself she was making the neighborhood better, that her vision of perfection was worth the bullying and harassment. But perfection is not the same as goodness, and control is not the same as leadership. The real test of a community is not how it looks on the surface, but how it treats people when they are struggling, how it responds to conflict, and whether it can transform problems into opportunities. Copper Ridge had passed that test, not because of me, but because enough people chose connection over compliance, generosity over greed, and courage over fear. I went back inside, made myself some hot chocolate, and sat down to answer emails from families wanting to use the equipment program. Outside, snow began falling again, fresh powder that would make for perfect riding conditions this weekend. Kids would laugh, parents would bond with their children, and memories would be made, all because someone tried to stop something good, and the community decided to make it even better instead. That is the thing about trying to control everything. The harder you squeeze, the more likely things are to slip through your fingers. Patricia had squeezed too hard, and in doing so, she had lost everything she thought she was protecting. Meanwhile, by opening my hands and offering freely what she tried to force me to withhold, I had gained something I never expected: a true sense of belonging, purpose, and community. The equipment share program continued to thrive long after that winter, expanding each year with new types of equipment and serving more families. Other neighborhoods across Colorado and eventually other states adopted the model. What started as my petty defiance against an overreaching HOA president became a genuine movement toward community-oriented living and resource sharing. Years later, people would still ask me about the conflict with Patricia Hendricks, curious about how it felt to be targeted by someone so determined to make me fail. My answer was always the same: it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Not because I enjoyed the conflict, but because it forced me to think differently, to find creative solutions, and to discover that sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all, but rather building something so positive that it makes the original attack irrelevant. Jake Ferguson's equipment share program became a permanent fixture of life in Copper Ridge, a testament to what happens when good people refuse to be bullied and choose, instead, to make their corner of the world a little bit better.